We live in a world that celebrates love stories. We have Valentine's Day, wedding ceremonies, anniversary celebrations, and we write songs about our soulmates. Yet infidelity rates remain stubbornly consistent across every culture we study. In the United States, it's estimated that between 20 to 25% of married people will have an affair. In some cultures, it's even higher. In others, it's more accepted. So what's going on here? Are we all just morally confused? Are we fighting against our better angels? Or is something else at play? What if I told you that both your capacity for deep, committed love and your wandering eye might be equally natural? What if the real question isn't whether humans are naturally monogamous or promiscuous, but why we evolved to be capable of both? Recently, I've been studying human mating behavior, not to judge it, not to prescribe what we should do, but to understand why we do what we do. And what I've discovered might change how you think about love, relationships, and human nature itself. I'm not talking about what's right or wrong in relationships. This is about understanding the evolutionary forces that shaped us over millions of years and how those forces still influence our hearts and minds today. By the end of this video, I hope you'll see human sexuality not as a battle between good and evil, but as a fascinating evolutionary compromise that made us who we are. First, I want to show you 3 clues that reveal something surprising about our past, and maybe help explain why modern relationships can feel so complicated. The first clue is what I call the jealousy gender gap. Men and women get jealous about different things, and this difference shows up everywhere we look. When researchers asked men to imagine their partner being unfaithful, it's sexual infidelity that tends to upset them the most. The thought of their partner sleeping with someone else was unimaginable. But when they ask women the same question, it was emotional infidelity. The thought of their partner falling in love with someone else, sharing intimate conversations, forming a deep emotional bond was difficult to comprehend. This pattern holds true across cultures, from Japan to Germany to Brazil. It's not learned behavior varying by society, it's universal. But why would this be? Well, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense. Throughout human history, men could never be completely certain that a child was theirs. A woman who had sex with another man might be carrying that man's child, not her partner's. So men who were particularly attuned to sexual infidelity were more likely to invest their resources in their own offspring. Women faced a different challenge. They always knew which children were theirs, but they needed a partner who would stick around to help raise those children. A man who fell in love with another woman might abandon his family entirely. So women who were particularly sensitive to emotional infidelity were more likely to keep their partners committed and invested. The second clue is written in our anatomy. Human females have hidden ovulation. Unlike our closest relatives, the chimpanzees, human women don't advertise when they're fertile. Chimp females develop obvious swellings when they're ovulating, signaling to males that this is the time for mating. Human women? No external signs at all. But why hide fertility? One theory suggests it's because our ancestors lived in groups where multiple matings were common. Hidden ovulation meant that several males might think they were the father of a child, leading multiple males to protect and provision for that child. It was fertility insurance. Then there's the human penis. The human penis has a distinctive shape compared to other primates. Some researchers hypothesize that this shape functions to displace sperm from previous mating. If this sounds crude, remember that we're talking about evolutionary adaptations that developed over millions of years. These anatomical features suggest our ancestors were not strictly monogamous. The third clue comes from anthropology. When researchers catalogued 849 different human societies throughout history, they found something remarkable. 708 of them, about 83%, practiced polygamy. That's one man with multiple wives. Only about 16% were strictly monogamous. Even today, while most modern societies are legally monogamous, we see high rates of divorce and remarriage. We're what scientists call serial monogamists, forming pair bonds sequentially rather than mating for life. So, what do these clues tell us? They suggest that our ancestors lived in a world where both pair bonding and multiple partnerships were part of the human experience. But here's where the story gets really interesting. How did we get from there to here? How did humans transition from groups with flexible mating arrangements to the strong pair bonds we see across cultures today? The answer lies in what I call the Great Evolutionary Compromise. Picture our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago. High-ranking males dominated access to females, just like we see in many primate groups today. But low-ranking males faced a choice: keep fighting battles they couldn't win, or try a different strategy entirely. Some of them began to offer something new: provisions, food, protection, resources, not just during mating, but continuously. This was revolutionary. A female who partnered with a provisioning male could spend less time foraging for food and more time caring for her children. Her children were more likely to survive. The males who provided resources were more likely to have their genes passed on to the next generation. But here's the crucial part. This only worked if females chose to be faithful to their provisioning partners. A male who invested resources in a female who then mated with other males was wasting his evolutionary investment. So natural selection began favoring females who could form strong emotional bonds with their providers. This is where love, as we know it, began to evolve. The same brain chemistry that bonds a mother to her child, oxytocin, began to create bonds between romantic partners. Dopamine created the reward pathways that made pair bonding feel good. Vasopressin triggered the mate-guarding behaviors we now call jealousy. What emerged was remarkable. Humans who were capable of both strategies. We could form deep, lasting pair bonds when it made evolutionary sense. But we also retained the capacity for mate-seeking when opportunities arose or when existing relationships failed to meet our needs. Think of human sexuality like a Swiss Army knife. We didn't evolve just one tool. We evolved multiple tools for different situations: the capacity for deep romantic love, the drive to seek genetic diversity, the ability to form long-term partnerships, the motivation to compete for desirable mates. All of these are part of our evolutionary toolkit. But evolution didn't stop there. Culture began to shape how we used these tools. Some societies emphasized monogamy and created strong social sanctions against infidelity. Others accepted polygamy as normal. Some cultures developed elaborate courtship rituals. Others arranged marriages. Some celebrated sexual exploration. Others demanded chastity. What we see today is the result of this complex interaction between our evolved psychology and our cultural environment. In individualistic cultures that value personal autonomy, we see higher rates of divorce and remarriage. In collectivistic cultures that emphasize family stability, we see different patterns. Neither is more natural than the other. They're both expressions of our underlying flexibility. Now, I want to be very clear about something. Understanding our evolutionary history doesn't justify any particular behavior. The fact that humans have the capacity for multiple mating strategies doesn't mean that infidelity is acceptable or that monogamy is unnatural. Evolution explains the is, not the ought. What this understanding does give us is compassion. Compassion for ourselves when we struggle with competing desires. Compassion for our partners when they face the same struggles. And wisdom about the choices we make. You see, the question, is promiscuity natural for humans, is a wrong question. It assumes that humans have one natural state, one correct way of being. But our nature is flexible. We evolved to be contextually adaptive, to respond to different environments with different strategies. Some of you are naturally inclined toward long-term monogamous relationships. That's not repression or social conditioning. That's one expression of human nature. Others of you might struggle with monogamy, feeling drawn to variety and novelty. That's not moral failure or lack of willpower. That's another expression of human nature. The key is conscious choice. When we understand our evolutionary programming, we're not slaves to it. We can decide which aspects of our nature to cultivate and which to redirect. A person who understands their tendency toward jealousy can work on building trust and security. A person who understands their attraction to novelty can channel that into other areas of life or discuss it openly with their partner. This has profound implications for how we think about relationships in the 21st century. Instead of assuming that everyone should want the same type of relationship, we can recognize that different people might thrive in different arrangements. Some people are happiest in traditional monogamous marriages. Others thrive in polyamorous relationships with multiple committed partners. Still others prefer serial monogamy, having intense but time-limited relationships. The key is honesty. Honesty with ourselves about what we want and need. Honesty with our partners about our desires and struggles. And honesty in our communities about the full spectrum of human sexuality. We need to start having better conversations about love and relationships. Conversations based on understanding rather than judgment. Conversations that acknowledge complexity rather than demanding simple answers. Conversations that recognize that the person sitting next to you might have a completely different relationship to love and sexuality than you do. And that's not only okay, it's part of what makes us human. So the next time you feel the contradiction between your loving heart and your wandering eye, remember this. You're not broken. You're not morally confused. You're human. You carry within you millions of years of evolutionary wisdom about love, partnership, and reproduction. Sometimes that wisdom creates conflict in our modern world, but it also gives us the capacity for both passionate love and adaptive flexibility. Now that we understand our complex evolutionary heritage, how do we choose to live? How do we honor both our need for connection and our need for autonomy? How do we build relationships that work for us as individuals and as a species? These are the conversations we need to be having. And they start with understanding that human nature isn't simple, isn't uniform, and isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be curious about, to explore with compassion, and to express with conscious intention. Thank you.